California, Mr. Swalwell, for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and wanted to thank each and every one of our witnesses. This, of course, is important. I think in just the last year, whether it's the LAX shooting or some of the perimeter challenges that we've seen, or even the oceanic crash at SFO, which is near my district, we have certainly seen the challenges that aviation can pose for us. And for me, aviation security is so important because if we do not have public confidence in aviation security, the economy, we know, will greatly suffer. And I wanted to first ask Mr. Capello, you mentioned in your testimony calling for pilot testing of technology, and you noted that research could enable airports to more wisely use limited monetary resources to implement projects to better protect airport perimeters. And in San Jose, about 2 months ago, we had a teenager breach the perimeter by going over the fence, which was not seen or detected by human eyes or video surveillance, and he boarded a flight that took him to Hawaii as a stowaway. And what that illustrated to me was that we don't have TSA guidelines right now that require airports to be alerted when any person or thing crosses an airport perimeter. And these perimeters are vast. At San Jose, it's 1,000 acres, which is approximately 10 football fields that you could put within, I'm sorry, more than, which is 100 football fields that you could put in this airport grounds, bigger than many small cities. So do you think the guidelines that TSA has should require every airline or every airport to be alerted if the perimeter is crossed in a way that it doesn't get in the way of your goal of allowing each airport to individually have their own security plan?
No, I don't. I believe, again, that the experts who are tasked with that on the ground, people like myself, are more than able to handle that. So a couple things with that. At Fort Lauderdale, we had a fence jumper, didn't make the national news. It was within the last couple months. I don't have perimeter detection, intrusion detection. I don't have a lot of things. I do need some things, but there's a way to go about that. The outcome of the story at Fort Lauderdale is that while the gentleman was going up the fence, the community policing part already had kicked in, and we were receiving calls through 3 different numbers. We publish of course, 911. We also, on the back of our badges, have a number you can call to immediately talk to our control center. And then we have a police non-emergency number. So as this individual was climbing the fence, we were already receiving calls.
Don't you think, Mr. Capello, that for perimeters that are so vast that it's impossible for human eyes to detect these, especially at night?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about a simple way to present my testimony to you about this particular issue, and the only thing I can come up with, and I apologize, but it's some time ago I used to carry a cell phone, and now I carry a smartphone. I can still make phone calls with both of them, but I'm much more productive with the smartphone. So if my airport director came to me and said, hey, we just found $25 million and we're going to put in this elaborate CCTV system, intrusion detection system, I'd be the happiest guy in the room. But the bottom line is that's not the only area we're responsible for. You heard testimony today that we have roadways, we have buildings, we have commercial crimes, we have assaults, we have everything. We also have fence jumpers, unfortunately. I think we all need to devote attention to it. I'm not an alarmist about it just yet. Of course, I would like to have technology that would make my workforce more productive, my police and my security people.
And do you think that $5 million, which the Safe Skies Alliance has right now, is enough to study the technologies, or do you think expanding that program would benefit perimeter security?
I think it's a great question, and it's an easy one for me. I think it needs to be expanded. Why? When I became aware of what the work that Safe Skies was doing, the gentleman was trying to explain to me exactly what they do, and he knew I wasn't getting it. And he said, listen, just think of consumer reports. And he said, what are consumer reports of airport security? And after thinking about it, it's the best way to convey my testimony to you. I don't have the resources nor the time to evaluate if this system will work in the rain, the snow, the heat, the fog, the sand, animals. They have experts to do that. And they will tell you what the system can do and what the system can't do. We at airports have...
Sorry, Mr. Capella, I think my time has expired, but it looks like we may have
We'll do a second round.
second round, yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
If all the
I'll yield
members
back.
agree, we'll,
Thank you, Mr. Capella. First, I'd like to correct my math. That'd be almost 1,000 football fields. But, Mr. McLean, when I toured San Jose Airport, I was stunned to hear how few sworn law enforcement officers the city of San Jose gives to the airport in coordination. And I don't think the number needs to be divulged, but it's pretty low. And do you have a recommended formula for number of officers per acre or per number of travelers daily at an airport?
Well, thank you, sir. That still varies from airport to airport and county to county. I will say that having a proprietary law enforcement agency there as opposed to a municipal agency, or with all due respect to my colleague here, a county agency, sometimes that varies in terms of the dedicated force there. And typically, it's the agencies that are not proprietary that allocate less resources. That's just my opinion. That's what I've seen. I believe that as airports grow, as they expand, they have to reassess what officers they have allocated. If you're making the responsibility larger, you can't just say, hey, we got by with it 5 years ago when we had less area of responsibility. I know it was talked about earlier about whether you should have officers dedicated at a screening station or not. You also have to look at, if you have an officer dedicated to that screening post, that's one less officer to rotate around. But when you look at embassies, or when you look at when we came in here today, there were police officers dedicated there as you came in. I don't know how you on this panel would be if you came in one day and those guys were just roving around, or if you went into an embassy and you didn't see a Marine there, he was just roving around. So those are real things that we have to look at, and whether that revenue is being allocated to those public safety resources in conjunction with the expansion of those airports.
And there's perception value, right, to having someone at the checkpoint, because I actually agree with you about giving them more latitude to rove around, but I imagine the other side of the argument would be the perception value of an armed officer at a checkpoint. Another question, and actually I'd open it up to anyone who wishes to answer, and I think our airport security directors may have some thoughts on this. One of our local airports, I learned and observed that at the general aviation entrance point, folks can enter who have their planes at the airport, can fob their way in with a badge without any security personnel watching them come in or verifying that their fob or badge is for that person, and leaving the risk of someone tailgating in behind, or somebody who isn't the pass holder badging in to the area. And at this particular airport, the general aviation area can get you to the commercial part of the airport. And I had concerns about that, about whether even on the general aviation side, if we should have it humanized, whether it's someone on the ground looking at the pass, or remotely having someone hold up their pass to a camera, and so we're at least verifying people that are coming in and out. Any thoughts on that? Everyone's looking at you, Mr. Capella.
I'll take it. I do have thoughts about it. At the airport I'm stationed, we don't use a fob, but we do use an airport-issued identification badge for that type of access. And there's an awful lot of vetting and security checks, security threat assessments, fingerprint-based criminal history checks that go on before that credential is issued. So yes, at the airport I'm at, you can use that credential to access the general aviation or fixed base operator area of the airport. And yes, you could eventually go from that area to a more secure area of the airport. At my airport, to go to that more secure area of the airport, you have to go through another type of staffed credential check because the two levels of security are different. So it acts like a lock, and you'll eventually balance it out that if you're going from a, let's just call it a restricted area to a more secure area, you yet have another check. At that gate where that credential was first used, where there was not a guard, there is generally CCTV, and if there's any issues at that gate, we start watching that gate very closely. There's also equipment hooked to that gate that generates alarms if a gate is manipulated with or kept open too long and things like that. What I find generally is that when you evaluate the risks and the threats and the consequences and whatnot, that to me it's very low risk at this point because of the setup I currently have. I'm very comfortable with the setup I have. There may be other airports that don't have such an elaborate setup. Great. But at least where I'm at, I do. So I'm very, it's low on my radar right now compared to other things that go on in a aviation security setting.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.